I come across some issues of similar characters having similar physiques and silhouettes, if you will. How do you make those silhouettes stand out? How do you make those designs unique from one another? This stage is way more important than the final stage. If it's not there in the beginning, it won't be there in the end. Male form like this is very typical in your basic designs of characters, whether it's a hero or a villain. I came up with 4 characters that I think fit this basic form. They're printed out in like this blue kind of silhouette. And I did that so that you can see how similar of a form each one of these characters possess. First character is Danny Rand, the Iron Fist. Second character is the Black Panther. Third character, Daredevil. And you have Captain America at the end. I can help bring home the point of how easy it is to fall into what I call a cookie cutter design language when it comes to these characters, but how can we make them stand out? There are some assets to each of these characters already that can help aid their individual design and silhouette. The Black Panther, on his cowl, he has the panther ears that protrude from his head. Captain America has the eagle wings, if you will. But what else can we do that would help aid the silhouettes of each of these characters? We're going to look at Daredevil here for a second. Think about his actual character, his narrative, his story. He's a character who is a blind character. So he uses his senses a lot. The hearing, even his touch and movements allow him to sense and go about his movements. He's agile, but he may be, at least for me, a little more of a street level grounded agile. And he also is a character who comes from a boxing background. All of the characters here are similar in height. Part of his shape language, I think, is he could be a little shorter. Now, the only way that really can be conveyed is that you have to compare him in a lineup. That's not necessarily going to solve anything here if he's just individually on his own. I think he should have a little more bulk to him. A male gymnast who can box. What does that look like? Maybe a kickboxer, if you will. This is just a quick sketch draw over. Maybe give him a little more of a broader, maybe a little wider shoulders. Head can still stay similar, but I'm just thinking about the overall basic shape. And just a little more, stocky in terms of his overall structure. Again, I'm thinking about gymnast, boxer type. Right here, the original drawing, that rib area, the ab area was more inward. I'm pushing it outward, okay? I would rather do a character like Daredevil, not as defined, it's not as high level of training. Because I mentioned about making him shorter, I can make some decisions even now in this overall structure here. Make his legs just a little more, make him a little wider. You can play with this torso, belt area. Let's see, let's bring that chest up just a little more. So this is the chest area. Trying to make sure I have my center line. All right, so I'm making some decisions now at this stage that I can go back and refine, like his leg length. I'm going to shorten that just a little bit. I'll bring this knee up to about right there. That's the wonders of doing things on a sketch level. Most of this stuff I would do from a digital standpoint because it allows me to edit more freely. But same effect here as far as drawing analog. If you can compare the 4, it's already feeling different. This more rounded exterior of his shoulders, the more broad it is, kind of gives you that feeling that he's a little bulkier. He's not as slender as these guys. Okay, so I'm making some decisions here to widen his overall form, make him a little shorter. And again, just pretend none of these guys are here right now. That information should, give you enough of a guide to think when comparing him to a Black Panther, comparing him to Danny Rand in a Cap, he might be the shortest one out of all of those guys, or at least, he's not the tallest. The broad shoulders, a wider neck, wider thighs slightly. I made the arms a little shorter as well. I mean, I could go even more, push the length of his hands to about here, but we can kind of explore and change that as we go. But definitely the feet, shorten the feet, so that helps. All right, again, this is just rough, but I got enough information here that would allow me to take this to a more completed illustration design, if you will. All of this is just to give me a guide in case I want to go back in and take this to somewhat of a final. Something as simple as his devil horns immediately kind of reads as the Daredevil character. All right, the next guy I'm going to tackle here is Danny Rand. He has a fighting style that is very fast, powerful. His training, fictional place Kunlun. I think about martial arts, the Bruce Lees and the Jackie Chans and the Jet Lees of the world. Overall form and structure, they're not the most tall people. The musculatures of those individuals, it's not bulky, obviously. And so I want to take that basic information. The character Danny Rand is not a Bruce Lee per se, but he has a lot of those traits. So I want to kind of play with those aesthetics when designing him. Similar to Daredevil, making him a little wider, I'm going to make Danny a little thinner. I'll keep those shoulders because I think those shoulders it kind of works with this form. So he stands out a little more, but definitely those arms are smaller, which makes his torso, let's omit that. That makes his torso, very thin as well. Neck is a little thinner. Of course, he has the hair here. A lot of subtle changes definitely gives you a more complete, realized feel to each of the characters. Spider-Man, Daredevil, Danny, Black Panther, they all have a very similar form, and you will find yourself really just kind of falling into that blanket form. It's just kind of the nature of designing this stuff. But I like to think about what makes these characters unique, and then I use that as my direction to create interesting shape language that would then be used as my template whenever I'm drawing them in space. And that also accompanies for the silhouette, creating interesting silhouettes. And Danny probably maybe a little taller than Daredevil. And just with that bit of information, kind of knowing how interesting of a difference between these two, now it makes it more appealing for me to go in a actual story with these characters. So again, Danny Rand, Iron Fist, smaller waist. Just remember, I'm putting an arrow there for me just to remember that his waist comes in a little more there. Somewhere in there. So I might push that in a little more. Again, find my center just to make sure I got everything balanced. This sort of represents that dragon. Okay, some of this stuff here, I just putting it in for me. So when I go back to light boxing this and cleaning it up, I'll have pretty much every bit of information there. So next here is Captain America. They call him the Sentinel of Liberty. So definitely patriotic. He stands for all of the things that America should stand for. He is the living embodiment of that. So you think of strength, you think of being regal, the character that should have the most in terms of stature when you're comparing them to the other three. And what I would do with him is just kind of similar to what I did with Daredevil, is give him broader shoulders. Even though if you look at and compare, these shoulders are a little more broad, but they have more of a, his deltoids, they're protruding out a little more. With Cap, wouldn't mind doing that, but I think just making that shoulder broad and then putting a little more arch on it. Right here, it's kind of flat. It was not as round as, as what I'm doing right now. So I want to give him that. Then we're gonna protrude those muscles out. I'm gonna go for a shape language that kind of represents for what he is, and that's the ultimate soldier. Super athletic, very broad, very upright, a torso with pretty broad shoulders, has a stature of a 6'10", 6'11" person. So he will be the tallest out of the four. Give him those muscles more defined. I think about someone like a tight end for football. So I would approach him basically like that. So give him those nice broad shoulders. Those pecs can be a little kind of a wider. It started here because they were here on the original shape. But I'm gonna push them out just a little more. That arm, those arms are gonna be definitely wide. And again, he has interesting silhouette design language that allows you to notice who he is for the most part, and that's the winged cowl. That alone kind of helps his overall design information. Some of the early illustrators in the comic medium, in the superhero express, was the 8 heads tall approach to a hero, meaning that head should be 8 heads worth of the entire form of the character. And the head, is something about the size of the head. It gives you some kind of feel that allows you to have the sense that the character is taller or shorter. Like the bigger the head, create this illusion that the head size being larger makes the body shorter, as opposed to a smaller head makes the body taller. So we'll approach that with the same mindset. I guess we'll give him a smile for right now. Looks a little crazy. But again, this is just just to kind of get the basic idea of how to approach the character once you're in a space to where you feel comfortable enough to go to the final. The broad shoulders, the very fit waist. I honestly keep everything else the same with characters that are more upright in their posture. I tend to make their torsos and arms a little bigger, but I think this still works. And kind of a quick little sidebar, when you're drawing any article of clothing or something that kind of exceeds apart from the body, like most of these characters, every character here has a costume that is form-fitting. What about costumes that are more loose or something that kind of protrudes away from the actual form? This flap exceeds the form. So I tell students, individuals, to do what we call a draw through. This works for all kinds of elements that you may use in your illustrations, like underneath this boot is a leg. That leg still continues, even though you may not see it. You have to keep that information still in place, so when you go from a place where the form is seen to where it's unseen, back to where it's seen, you want it to have consistency. So in other words, don't draw this part, then draw this part, and then draw the rest. Draw the entire foot so that you can get the placement down to where it's seen again. Anytime there's an object interrupting another object, overlapping or what have you, it's good to try to do what we call the draw through to help realize, because even here with this hand, not all the hand is seen. Even here with the arm, that's another thing that I hadn't really talked about, but this entire arm over here is not seen, but it's still there. Once you understand the figure enough, you don't necessarily need to do just the form and then draw the design, the character on top. You can kind of improvise and do both, especially with characters that have more form-fitting costumes. You can kind of get away with just drawing the form. What about a character that has a lot of bulky clothing? How do you draw that and still keep that information? Let's just say this character has a big giant gauntlet, rings around it, and the glove keeps going up, and it's like that information, that form is still underneath there. This is just covering it up. So you need to be aware of that information underneath. That's what they call underdrawing. Drawing through and underdrawing kind of work hand in hand. So I would say for beginners, it is advantageous to draw that form, that basic form, just to make sure you have that information down, and then on top, draw your design. Okay, he looks a lot happier there now. He looked a little creepy at first. All right, let's throw that last bit of information in there. I was always told that the first stripe is always in the middle of Cap's torso. This shading right here represents red. All right, last but not least, Mr. T'Challa himself. Gathering that information, he's a king, ruler, stoic, regal, stern, strong, lots of agility. So he's a cross between, I think, in terms of form, Danny Rand and the Captain America. So he's taller than Iron Fist, but definitely shorter than Cap. I think for the most part, this is just me, I think because we've already made Iron Fist a smaller musculature, Daredevil a little more stocky, stern muscle. Of course, Cap is the more upright, super athlete kind of form. Honestly, we're just gonna kind of keep T'Challa in a similar form, because now that there's 3 individual forms, that makes this form unique anyway. So you don't have to do a whole lot to it. And again, when you put them in a lineup, you're gonna see the individual differences in height, so on and so forth. A lot of times, Marvel will hire me to bring some of this unique design language to their properties, because they know that I have those sensibilities kind of already embedded. So it's not a hard push to get to a place design-wise, because I'm in that headspace already. I'll make this head smaller. I'm gonna give him some sharper, more edgier fingers, simply because of the Panther trait. You know, it's very rough here, but you can kind of see the difference between, you know, his fists look like he's been boxing, so it has a more bulkier, puffier, swollen, you know, knuckle kind of feel. Danny Rand has more square. He has the bulky, more kind of square. I can even make his hands a little bigger if I wanted to, which kind of could help. Then we got this kind of agile, sharp, knife-like, cat-like hands. Even though I sat here and I try to problem solve everything, it may not be until I actually, like if I'm drawing them in a story, that something really clicks. So I'll go back in the middle of the story, go, okay, I'm not gonna make, you know, Cap's, I'm gonna make him even longer or make him even big, you know, whatever I think could really help serve the story. He also has that A, at least the old school design. I don't know, I just love that A on the forehead. It's so cool. All right. Doing this has inspired me to feel like, wow, I would love to take all of these to finish, right? And that's what you want. You want to feel great about this stage. If I could tell students anything, is that this stage is way more important than the final stage. What you want is for this stage to feel so connected to this that it makes the final stage almost like breathing.
We have way more lessons with Sanford in the premium course. Sanford refines the rough sketch of Daredevil into a finalized design. He also shows us how to design a character lineup and make a dynamic group shot. If you want the drawing skills of a professional comic artist, go check out our other lessons at proko.com/Marvel.